Hello and welcome. I invite you to join me on a rather special journey, not across the vast plains or deep oceans we see today, but back through the mists of time itself. We are venturing into the quiet, forgotten corners of our own history to unearth some of its most profound and enduring mysteries. We will walk among the shadows of magnificent empires and ingenious cultures that rose, flourished, and then quite suddenly vanished from the world stage, leaving behind only tantalizing whispers and enigmatic ruins. These are the stories of humanity's lost civilizations, societies that disappeared, seemingly without a trace. Our quest will take us across continents, from the dense jungles of Central America to the sun-scorched river valleys of South Asia, and even to the most remote islands on Earth. We will stand in awe of their achievements, towering pyramids, meticulously planned cities, and a knowledge of the cosmos that seems almost impossible for their time. Yet for all their brilliance, their final chapters remain unwritten, their ultimate fate a puzzle that has perplexed historians and archaeologists for centuries. What became of these remarkable people? The questions are as vast and varied as the civilizations themselves. Were they the unfortunate victims of nature's unforgiving power, devastating earthquakes, catastrophic floods, or a subtle creeping change in climate that starved their lands? Did they fall to the sword in brutal, unrecorded wars, or succumb to the silent spread of disease? Or could the truth be something far stranger, something that lies beyond our conventional understanding of history? Join me as we seek answers to these questions and delve deep into the mysteries of our past. Our journey begins in the heart of the Mesoamerican jungle, a world of vibrant green, teeming with life. But hidden beneath this dense canopy of trees lie the silent remnants of a truly extraordinary civilization, the Maya. For over 1,000 years, they dominated this landscape, building cities that were marvels of engineering and artistry. Places like Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza were not mere settlements. They were sprawling urban centers, home to hundreds of thousands of people with towering stone pyramids that reached for the heavens, rivaling the great structures of ancient Egypt. The Maya were more than just master builders. They were brilliant astronomers and mathematicians. They developed a calendar of astonishing accuracy, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with a precision that would not be surpassed for centuries. Their understanding of the concept of zero, an abstract mathematical idea, placed them in a very select group of ancient cultures. They created a complex hieroglyphic writing system, one of the few fully developed scripts of the pre-Columbian Americas, recording their history, their beliefs, and their royal lineages in stone and bark paper. Their society was a complex tapestry of city-states, each ruled by a divine king, a Kuhul Ajo, who acted as the intermediary between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. They engaged in intricate rituals, vast trade networks that stretched across the region, and at times fierce warfare with their neighbors. Their art, preserved in delicate pottery and monumental stone carvings, depicts a world rich with symbolism, a complex cosmology of creation, sacrifice, and rebirth. They were, in every sense, a civilization at the peak of its intellectual and cultural power. And then, something remarkable happened. Beginning in the late 8th century, a profound silence began to fall across the southern Maya lowlands. The great cities which had been the pulsating heart of this civilization for centuries began to be abandoned. The construction of grand monuments ceased. The intricate carvings of royal history stopped. One by one, these once thriving metropolises were emptied, their plazas and palaces left to be slowly, inexorably reclaimed by the relentless jungle. What could have caused such a widespread and sudden collapse? This is the central mystery of the Maya. There was no single cataclysmic event that we can point to. Instead, archaeologists have pieced together a mosaic of potential factors, a perfect storm of calamities that may have conspired to bring this great civilization to its knees. The evidence suggests a period of intense, prolonged drought, a severe shift in climate that would have devastated their agriculture, which was heavily reliant on consistent rainfall. This environmental stress would have had cascading effects. With dwindling food supplies, social unrest would have become rampant. The authority of the divine kings, whose rituals were meant to ensure the favor of the gods and the coming of the rains, would have been shattered. We see evidence in the archaeological record of increased warfare between city-states, perhaps desperate struggles over scarce resources like water and fertile land. The once cohesive network of trade and alliance appears to have fractured. Disease is another powerful contender. The dense urban populations of the Maya cities would have been highly vulnerable to epidemics. A novel pathogen, perhaps introduced through trade or exacerbated by malnutrition, could have swept through the populace with devastating speed, leaving a trail of death and social collapse in its wake. The skeletal remains from this period sometimes show signs of malnutrition and disease, lending weight to this theory. Yet no single theory seems to fully explain the totality of the abandonment. It is more likely a complex interplay of all these factors. Imagine a society already weakened by years of drought and famine, its political structure crumbling as its leaders fail to provide solutions. Then, add to this volatile mix the constant threat of warfare and the outbreak of a deadly plague. It becomes a feedback loop of disaster, each problem compounding the others until the very fabric of society unravels. The Maya people, of course, did not completely disappear. Millions of their descendants live on today in the same regions, speaking the ancient languages and practicing traditions that have been passed down through generations. It was the political and social structure of the classic Maya period, the culture of the great cities and divine kings, that collapsed. They did not vanish from the earth, but their world was irrevocably changed, their great stone cities left as silent monuments to a golden age lost to time. The jungle, which they had once tamed, became their tomb. For 1,000 years it held their secrets, wrapping the temples and palaces in a green shroud. It is only in the last century that we have begun to peel back these layers, to read the stories in the stones, and to ask the profound question, how could a civilization of such genius and power simply walk away from it all and let the forest reclaim its grandest achievements? The answer, it seems, is as complex and mysterious as the Maya themselves. We travel now to the arid plains of what is now Pakistan and northwest India, to the banks of the mighty Indus River. Here, over 4,500 years ago, contemporaneous with the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, another society blossomed, one that was in many ways their equal if not their superior. This was the Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, and it remains one of history's greatest enigmas. A culture of immense sophistication that left behind no grand monuments, no royal tombs, and no readable text. What they did leave behind are the remains of some of the world's first and most brilliantly planned cities. Places like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were masterpieces of urban design, laid out on a precise grid system. The houses, built from standardized baked bricks, were equipped with features that would seem astonishingly modern. Many had private wells and bathrooms, connected to a complex, city-wide network of covered drains and sewers, a feat of sanitation engineering unmatched in the world for thousands of years to come. This remarkable uniformity suggests a powerful, centralized authority. Yet the nature of that authority is a complete mystery. We have found no opulent palaces, no grand temples dedicated to powerful gods, and no lavish burials for divine kings, in stark contrast to their Egyptian and Mesopotamian counterparts, who celebrated their rulers in monumental art and architecture. The Harappan people appear to have been remarkably egalitarian. Their society seems to have been governed not by gods and kings, but by order and practicality. Their economy was clearly thriving. They were skilled artisans, producing beautiful pottery, intricate beadwork, and small exquisite terracotta figurines. But their most enigmatic creations are their thousands of small stone seals. These seals are intricately carved with images of animals, both real and mythical, and most tantalizingly, a script, a complex system of symbols that we have to this day been unable to decipher. It is the silent language of a lost world, holding the secrets to their beliefs, their history, and their identity. The Indus Valley civilization stretched over an immense area, larger than either ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. Their trade networks were vast, reaching by sea to the Persian Gulf and the civilizations of Mesopotamia. We know this because their distinctive seals have been found in archaeological sites in modern-day Iraq. They were a people connected to the wider world, prosperous and highly organized, inhabiting a world of clean streets, advanced plumbing, and peaceful order for nearly a millennium. Then, around 1900 BCE, the decline began. It was not a sudden collapse like that of the Maya, but a slow, creeping decay. The great cities began to shrink. The quality of building construction deteriorated. The once meticulous city planning gave way to haphazard construction. Trade with the outside world appears to have dwindled and then stopped altogether. The signature stone seals and the mysterious script that adorned them fell out of use. The the people of the Indus Valley began to abandon their magnificent cities. One of the leading theories for this decline points once again to the environment. The Indus Valley is a region dependent on the life-giving waters of its rivers, which are themselves fed by the annual monsoon rains. Evidence from paleoclimatology suggests that a major shift in climate patterns occurred during this period. The monsoons may have become weaker and less reliable, leading to prolonged droughts that would have crippled their agricultural base and made life in the large, dense cities unsustainable. Another possibility involves the very rivers that gave them life. Tectonic activity, common in this region, may have altered the course of the Indus River or its major tributaries, such as the Gagar-Hakra, which some believe was the mythical Saraswati River. A city like Mohenjo-daro, built on the river's bounty, would have been doomed if its water source suddenly shifted miles away. We see evidence of massive repeated flooding in the city's archaeological layers, suggesting a constant and losing battle against the forces of nature. The idea of an invasion was once a popular theory, championed by the archaeologist Mortimer Wheeler, who famously declared that the god Indra stands accused of destroying the civilization. This theory of an Aryan invasion was based on the discovery of some skeletons found in seemingly haphazard positions in the streets of Mohenjo-daro. However, modern archaeology has found little to no evidence of widespread warfare or a massacre. The skeletons show no signs of battle injuries, and there is no layer of ash and destruction that would indicate a violent conquest. Instead of a single cause, it is likely a combination of these pressures that led to the gradual de-urbanization. As the climate grew drier and the rivers became more unpredictable, the large centralized system that managed the cities may have broken down. People likely began to migrate away from the urban centers in smaller groups, moving to rural villages where they could better sustain themselves. The great Indus society did not die. It decentralized, its people dispersing, and its unified culture slowly dissolving into the regional cultures that would follow, leaving their silent, orderly cities to be buried by the sands of time. We now leave the solid ground of archaeology and venture into the realm of legend, into a story that has captivated the human imagination for over 2 millennia. It is the story of Atlantis. Unlike the Maya or the Indus Valley, for which we have tangible ruins and artifacts, Atlantis exists primarily as an idea, a powerful myth of a lost paradise swallowed by the sea. Its legacy is not in stone, but in the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. It is in two of Plato's dialogues, the Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, that the story of Atlantis is first told. He describes it as a mighty island nation, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a land of fabulous wealth, advanced technology, and immense military power, founded by Poseidon, the god of the sea. Its people were noble and virtuous, living in a perfectly organized society. Plato paints a vivid picture of the city of Atlantis itself. It was a marvel of engineering, composed of concentric rings of land and water, connected by bridges and tunnels. At its heart lay a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon, covered in silver and gold, gleaming in the sun. The land was incredibly fertile, producing an abundance of food, and the island was rich in precious metals, including a mysterious one he called orichalcum, which was said to shine with a red light. According to the tale, the Atlanteans were not content with their utopian existence. Their divine nature became diluted with human greed and hubris. They grew arrogant and corrupt and embarked on a campaign of imperial conquest, seeking to enslave the peoples of the Mediterranean, including the ancient Athenians, whom Plato portrays as their virtuous adversaries. The Athenians, in this telling, heroically repelled the mighty Atlantean army, preserving their freedom against overwhelming odds. But the final judgment on Atlantis came not from man, but from the gods themselves. As a punishment for their arrogance and impiety, a terrible cataclysm was unleashed upon the island. Plato writes that in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis was beset by violent earthquakes and floods. And then, in a final, devastating blow, it disappeared beneath the waves, sinking into the depths of the ocean, lost forever. For centuries, most scholars considered Plato's story to be just that, a story, a cautionary tale or allegory designed to explore themes of divine justice, the corrupting nature of power, and the ideal state, a concept central to Plato's philosophy. He may have invented Atlantis as a literary device, a perfect antagonist to highlight the virtues of his idealized ancient Athens. The story serves as a powerful warning about what happens when a society loses its moral compass. However, the allure of a real lost paradise has proven too strong for many to resist. Since the 19th century, a wave of speculation has sought to find a real-world location for the lost city. Countless theories have been proposed, placing Atlantis everywhere from the Caribbean to Antarctica. The search for Atlantis has become a cottage industry for amateur archaeologists, mystics, and adventurers, each certain they have found the key to the mystery. One of the most compelling and scientifically plausible theories links the myth of Atlantis to a real historical event, the cataclysmic volcanic eruption of Thera, now the Greek island of Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. The eruption blew the island apart, created a massive caldera, and sent towering tsunamis racing across the Aegean Sea, devastating the advanced Minoan civilization on the nearby island of Crete. The Minoans, like Plato's Atlanteans, were a sophisticated seafaring culture with magnificent palaces, advanced art, and extensive trade networks. The sudden and violent destruction of their world by a volcanic eruption and subsequent tsunamis bears a striking resemblance to Plato's account. It is possible that the memory of this real Bronze Age catastrophe was passed down through generations for over 1,000 years, becoming distorted and mythologized until it reached Plato, who then adapted it for his own philosophical purposes. Whether Atlantis was a real place, a distorted memory of the Minoan collapse, or purely a philosophical invention of Plato's, its power as a myth is undeniable. It speaks to a deep human longing for a lost golden age, a perfect world untainted by the flaws of our own. It is a story of paradise lost, a reminder of the fragility of even the greatest civilizations in the face of nature's power and our own human failings. The search for Atlantis is perhaps not a search for a physical place, but for a piece of ourselves. Our journey now takes us to the stark and beautiful landscapes of the American Southwest, to the canyons and mesas of the Four Corners region where Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico meet. This was the home of a people we know as the Anasazi, a Navajo word often translated as ancient ones or ancient enemies. Today, their descendants, the modern Pueblo peoples, prefer the term ancestral Pueblans. By either name, they were a culture that thrived here for over 1,000 years, only to vanish from their ancestral homeland in a remarkably short period of time. For centuries, these people lived in pit houses and small villages scattered across the mesa tops. They were expert dryland farmers, cultivating maize, beans, and squash in a challenging and often unforgiving environment. They developed intricate irrigation systems to channel precious water to their crops and were master potters, creating distinctive black-on-white pottery that is as beautiful as it is iconic of their culture. Their society was deeply connected to the land and the cycles of the seasons, but it is for their later architectural achievements that they are most famous. Around the 12th and 13th centuries, they began to construct some of the most spectacular and dramatic dwellings on the continent. They built massive multi-story great houses in places like Chaco Canyon, complex structures that served as ceremonial, administrative, and trading centers for a vast region. These buildings were aligned with remarkable astronomical precision, tracking the solar and lunar cycles. Even more astonishingly, they built entire villages directly into sheer cliff faces, creating breathtaking cliff dwellings like those at Mesa Verde in Colorado and Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. These were not primitive caves, but sophisticated multi-room stone and mortar structures tucked into natural alcoves hundreds of feet above the canyon floor. Access was often by a series of precarious hand and toe holds carved into the rock. It was a life lived on the edge, both literally and figuratively. The question of why they moved into these seemingly inaccessible and defensive locations is a key part of their mystery. Was it for protection from the elements, the shaded alcoves providing relief from the summer sun and shelter from winter storms, or were they defending themselves from other people? The late period of their occupation shows some signs of increased conflict and violence, suggesting that these cliff dwellings may have been fortresses built out of fear. Then, in the late 1200s, after centuries of occupation, they left. Within the span of a single generation, the great houses of Chaco Canyon were deserted, and the spectacular cliff palaces of Mesa Verde were abandoned. They walked away from their homes, their ceremonial kivas, and the lands their ancestors had farmed for centuries. The archaeological record shows a sudden and complete depopulation of the entire Four Corners region. They vanished. As with the Maya, the most likely culprit for this mass migration was a severe and prolonged drought. Tree ring data from this period reveals evidence of what is known as the Great Drought, which lasted for over 2 decades from about 1276 to 1299. In an already arid environment, a drought of this magnitude would have been catastrophic. Crops would have failed year after year. Springs and streams would have dried up, and the land would no longer have been able to support the population. The environmental stress likely exacerbated social and political problems. The religious and political leaders, whose rituals were meant to bring rain and ensure bountiful harvests, would have lost their authority and credibility. Competition for what little water and arable land remained may have erupted into violent conflict between communities. The defensive nature of the cliff dwellings might be a testament to this period of social breakdown and warfare. It is also possible that the system itself had simply grown too large and complex to be sustainable in this environment. The population had grown significantly during the preceding centuries of favorable climate. When the climate shifted, the delicate balance was broken. The society may have collapsed under its own weight, unable to cope with the combined pressures of environmental change, resource depletion, and internal conflict. But the ancestral Puebloans did not disappear from the face of the earth. They migrated. Oral traditions of their modern descendants, the Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblo peoples, tell stories of their ancestors' journeys from the north. They moved south and east, establishing new communities in places where the water supply was more reliable. The people survived, but they left their old world behind, leaving their magnificent cliff dwellings as silent, ghostly testaments to a life that once was. The mystery is not that they vanished, but why they left so completely, so quickly, and never returned. Our final journey takes us to one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth, a tiny speck of volcanic land in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. It is over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest populated land. This is Rapa Nui, more famously known as Easter Island. It is a place defined by an extraordinary mystery, a mystery embodied in the hundreds of colossal stone statues, the moai, that stand silent watch over the barren landscape. The island was first settled by Polynesian voyagers, likely around 1200 CE. They were master navigators, crossing the immense ocean in double-hulled canoes, bringing with them the plants and animals they would need to survive. They found an island that was at the time a subtropical paradise, covered in lush palm forests, teeming with birdlife. Here they established a complex and vibrant society, isolated from the rest of the world for centuries. At the heart of their culture was an obsession, a monumental undertaking that is difficult for us to comprehend. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, they began to carve the moai. These are monolithic human figures carved from the volcanic tuff of the Ranuraraku quarry. They are enormous, with the average statue standing about 4 meters tall and weighing around 14 tons. Some were even larger, with one unfinished giant measuring over 21 meters and weighing an estimated 270 tons. The sheer scale of this endeavor is staggering. Using only stone tools, the Rapa Nui people quarried these giants, intricately carved their features, and then, most remarkably of all, transported them many kilometers across the island to be erected on ceremonial platforms called ahu. How did a small, isolated population with no wheels, no draft animals, and no metal tools achieve such a phenomenal feat of engineering? This question has puzzled outsiders since the island was first encountered by Europeans. Recent experiments and oral traditions suggest a process of walking the statues upright, using ropes and a coordinated team of people to rock the statues forward inch by inch, much like moving a heavy refrigerator. It was a slow, laborious process that required immense social organization, cooperation, and a deep-seated cultural drive. The moai likely represented deified ancestors, their gaze directed inland to watch over their descendants, projecting their spiritual power, or mana, across the land. But when Europeans arrived on Easter Sunday, 1722, they did not find a thriving civilization. They found a small, impoverished population living on a desolate, treeless island. The people were engaged in constant warfare, and many of the great moai had been toppled from their platforms. What had happened to this society? What had become of the paradise the first settlers found, and the great civilization that had erected the stone giants? The story of Rapa Nui is often told as the ultimate ecological cautionary tale. The traditional theory, popularized by Jared Diamond in his book Collapse, suggests that the islanders brought about their own demise through ecocide. In their obsession with carving and transporting the moai, they cut down all the island's magnificent palm trees. The logs were needed for rollers, levers, and the ropes were made from the tree's fiber. The deforestation had catastrophic consequences. Without trees, they could no longer build the ocean-going canoes needed for fishing in deeper waters. The soil, exposed to the elements, eroded away, crippling their agriculture. Bird populations, a key food source, were decimated. With dwindling resources, the society descended into chaos, starvation, and brutal clan warfare. The toppling of the moai was a symbolic act of defiance and desecration against the ancestors who had failed to provide for them. However, more recent research presents a more complex picture. While deforestation certainly occurred, its impact may have been compounded by other factors. The introduction of the Polynesian rat, which arrived with the first settlers, may have played a devastating role. With no natural predators, the rat population would have exploded, feasting on the seeds of the palm trees and preventing the forest from regenerating. The islanders may have been fighting a losing battle against an invasive species. Furthermore, the final collapse of Rapa Nui society came after European contact. The arrival of outsiders introduced devastating diseases like smallpox and tuberculosis, to which the islanders had no immunity. In the 19th century, Peruvian slave raids decimated the population further, carrying away a significant portion of the remaining people, including many of the elders who held the knowledge of their culture and traditions, such as the ability to read their unique Rongorongo script, which remains undeciphered. The story of Rapa Nui is therefore not just a simple tale of self-inflicted ecological suicide. It is a more tragic and nuanced story of a resilient people who engineered incredible feats on a remote island, who battled environmental challenges, perhaps exacerbated by invasive species, and who were ultimately pushed over the edge by the devastating impacts of contact with the outside world. The silent moai remain not just as symbols of a lost civilization's ambition, but as solemn witnesses to a complex and heartbreaking history. Our journey through time has come to an end, but the mysteries themselves endure. From the abandoned jungle cities of the Maya to the silent, orderly streets of the Indus Valley, from the legendary depths of Atlantis to the cliffside fortresses of the Anasazi and the lonely vigil of the moai on Rapa Nui, we are left with more questions than answers. These stories are not just historical curiosities, they are profound and humbling reminders of the fragility of civilization. They show us how even the most brilliant, powerful, and organized societies can be brought to their knees by forces both seen and unseen. These lost worlds speak to us across the centuries, their ruins like echoes in a vast, quiet landscape. They challenge our own sense of permanence and force us to consider the delicate balance we ourselves maintain with our environment, our technology, and each other. The reasons for their decline, climate change, resource depletion, social conflict, disease, are not relics of the past. They are the very challenges that we face in our own time. In studying their fate, we may perhaps learn something vital about our own. But what do you think? The theories we have explored are based on the best evidence we have, but the book is far from closed on these ancient mysteries. Do you believe the Maya were conquered by drought, or was there another cause? Could the legend of Atlantis be a memory of the Minoan eruption? Share your own ideas and theories in the comments below. I would be fascinated to read them, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider subscribing and joining us for more explorations of history's greatest enigmas. Until next time, keep questioning.